In this video, I'm going to walk through this annual review operations list. So what this is a document that outlines the process that I use to keep track of all of my IEP meetings, my reevaluations, and all of the paperwork that I needed to do when I was working in the school systems. So what I would do is that typically, if I knew that I was going to go back to the same building the next year, so for example, it's May, we're wrapping up the school year, and I know what my caseload is going to look like in the fall, or at least I know what buildings I'm going to be covering. Oftentimes, I would do this before I even left school in the spring, so that it would be ready for me when I got back to school in August. But this is something that you could do first week of school if you don't have access to all of that yet, or that month leading up to school if you have access to your records. So the main thing is that I wanted to get on top of all of my paperwork. And yes, there might have been new students that would come onto my caseload throughout the year and I would add them to the list. But if I at least had the list started, it would make things less overwhelming for me. So what I did was, when I think about this, I think about the paperwork. I put the students on the list when I need to start doing the paperwork, not when they're due. So for example, if I have an annual review that is due in September, I would actually put it on the to-do list for August. And if I have a reevaluation, then I would actually put that on the list 2 months in advance so that I would have time to get the report written and contact the parents and start the meeting and go through the whole process. So I would actually put them on the list when I needed to start working on it, not when I needed to have it done. And if I was not the case manager, but I knew the student was due for a reevaluation, even if I wasn't the one that was going to be initiating the reevaluation, for example, if I knew it was a psychologist because the student had some other kind of an eligibility besides speech and language, for example, I would still put it on the list, even if I wasn't the case manager, because I knew that I had to start planning for it. And I'd even if I knew that the psychologist or a special ed teacher was going to be keeping track of that and being the one reaching out to everyone and scheduling the meeting, I'd still put it on the list because it would remind me to start having conversations with people about whether or not I needed to collect data, what data I needed to collect, and when I needed to start having conversations with the person that was scheduling the meeting. So even if I knew I was going to get a prompt from another person, I still made sure that I put it on the list. So I'm just going to walk through a couple examples here, how I would use this document. So for example, let's say that I have a student who is, he's got an annual review that is due in September. So I would just put his name down here and I would put annual review. He's just due for a regular annual review and the due date. So if it was, let's say it's September 15th, I would put that. And then let's say I've got some other students who are due in September. So I'm going to and I would just go on and add all of them. I probably want to highlight the month just so it's clear. And then let's say that I have, I'm going to go through all my months. Now, we would come back to school in August. So if I knew that there was one that I needed to get on right away, I would put that. If August was the first month that we were actually in school and I knew that something was due in August, let's say it was maybe due at the very end, I might use some other kind of a method or use some other kind of a scheduling tool to prompt myself to look at that student and get that started in addition to this tool. So I might use something else like my phone or another calendar if I knew I had a couple that were really, something that needed to be done right away when I got into the school year. So I would probably put those in August as well. So let's say that I have one that's due, and actually, let's Let's do this. And let's say this is due at the end of August, and I'm not going to be in school until August. I would put this in August because there's really no way I could get ahead of this if we're not even in school in July, but I would use something else to prompt myself to look at the list. So that's how I would handle those. But other than that, I would always put the name in the month before so that I knew to keep looking at this list. Okay, so let's say these are all annual reviews. So students whose IEP needs to just be updated at a certain time. And again, I would put the student down regardless of whether or not I was the case manager, because either way, I knew that I had to be doing things to be getting ready for the meeting, even if I wasn't the one that was scheduling it and so on. So let's say that I have a student at the end of October, actually, let's say end of November, who is due for an annual review. So what I would do is that I would put that in September. So I'm going to put, let's see. And I would put that she's due for a reeval, and then I am going to put the due date of the reeval. So let's say it's, okay, so I'm going to put that there because again, I need to start thinking about that reeval in September. And maybe I don't do it right away, September 1st, but if I have a master plan and another task list, I know that I need to put this on the task list in the coming weeks in September. So maybe it's not on my task list on September 1st, but maybe it's September 15th. I know I need to get moving on this. So I would use this type of a list to inform my master plan and my other to-do lists, because this is going to help me know what things I have coming up in that next month. So this is just a way that I would use these tools together in order to plan my main master list of all the things that I need to do. And you can even, if you're using electronic documents, maybe link to things. Like I could link to this, if I'm doing it electronically, I could link to it and have it as, you know, something that I could easily click on in some other kind of a master list. Now, when I was in the school systems, I was old school. I would do this in a Microsoft Word document. I would just write August, write all the names, September, all the names, and I would do it that way. And then I would just use for my master list and my to-do list, I actually used a paper planner, which if you have a hard time seeing things and you like things laid out in front of you, I do recommend doing some things on paper. I have switched over a lot of my tools to electronic because I like to have access to them and be able to edit them easily and have them on my phone. And I've also been going through this process for so long, I'm so familiar with it, I feel like I can transfer it over to electronic. But if you're somebody who likes to see things all laid out, there might be a reason for you to do some of these things on paper. I am doing it electronically because it's an easy way for me to share this information with you. Okay, one other thing I wanted to mention is that I usually mark these annual reviews some other way aside from just putting reeval, or sorry, I usually mark my reevals in a different way than I would my annual reviews, because I know that they're going to take some additional work. So for example, what I used to do is that I would highlight the text and put it in red, or something else you could even do here is, maybe you can highlight those due dates. So just mark it some way that you know, hey, this is a reeval coming up, especially if it's going to be one that is somewhat lengthy. So that is how I would document everything and keep track of all my meetings. And again, this is something, if it is an electronic document, it is nice to have an electronic version that you can easily update. And if you are somebody who likes paper as well, you can always print it out and then reprint it, or have a paper copy and an electronic copy if that works for you. But this is the way that I would do it when I would go through all of my evaluations. So to sum up, how it works is that preferably as soon as possible. If you can do it at the end of the school year, great. So that it's ready for you and ready to go when you come back to school in the fall. But if you can't do that, then do it the first week of school. And then the rules that I use are, if it is an annual review, I put it on the list the month before it's due. So I put it on the list when I actually need to do it, not when it's due. And then I just put the due date over here. And then if it is a reeval, I do it 2 months in advance. So again, put the due date here, but actually put it on the list 2 months before it is due so I can get on top of it. And also I usually do something else to further draw attention to those reevals, like highlight the text or something like that. If I have something that is due right away when I come back to school, I would make an exception and just put it in the month that it's due and make sure it's at the top of the list, and maybe use some other kind of supplemental tool in order to cue myself to look at this list. So the main thing is that with a list like this, remember, we're thinking about executive functioning. This list is only useful if you remember to use it. So if you make the list and then you never look at it, obviously it's not going to be super helpful. So if you know that you're somebody who is going to just look at your list and you're always going to be on top of your annual reviews and reevaluations, then you don't really need to necessarily do anything else. But if you are somebody who does need some reminders to look at this, you may want to use some other kind of a prompt in order to remind you to use the strategy that you have here. So for example, what you can do is, maybe you can schedule a reminder in your phone to look at your annual review list, or maybe you have one day every month and you put that on your master task list, where every day at the beginning of the first of the month, you go through your annual reviews. I used to do that. And now I even have a process that I go through the first of the month for myself. There's just things that I have to do monthly. So I just do them on the first of the month. The first of the month is my cue to go through the list of what I need to do this month. And then I do have some kind of a document where I go through all the things that are in my procedures for the month. So this can be one of those things you add to the list. So you can see how we want to use these tools together, use as supplemental calendars as needed. And if you feel like you're having a hard time just visualizing and seeing it, it's always good to use some kind of a paper planner to supplement.